Despite a big increase in the amount of houses for sale in Florida, sales fell by more than 10%. In other words, even with housing inventory surging to a 5.5-year high, September home sales for the month fell to lowest levels for that month since September of 2017. In contrast, home prices for the state as a whole are still very high, only about $20,000 less than the all-time record high that was set back in April this year. But will that change given the rapid rise in the amount of houses for sale in the state? Time will tell. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the latest update from the Florida Realtors Association because there's some very big differences regarding home prices, housing inventory, home sales, and much, much more. With that said, hope you guys get a lot of value out of today's video. And of course, if you do, please hit the like button. Also, consider subscribing as well. I post frequent housing market updates so you guys can be more informed. Now, before I share this report from the Florida Realtors Association, I want to share this video from Brad O'Connor, who's their chief economist. He basically breaks down how we had a lack of business calendar days for the month of September and how Hurricane Helene affected potentially the housing market. So it could kind of skew the figures for the month of September, which is the month I'm going over in today's video. However, at the very end of this video, though, he kind of backtracks because he shows the decrease in home sales for all the major counties in Florida. So let's just listen in for a few minutes and we'll kind of circle back after this video.
Florida's housing market underperformed in September in terms of closed sales. But based on the latest statistics from Florida Realtors, there is some positive news on the inventory front. Let's start with those closed sales figures first, though. Prior to September, the worst month this year for closed sales in terms of year-over-year declines was back in June. Back then, single-family home sales were down by over 11% compared to the same month in 2023. September's figures, however, turned out to be just slightly worse than that, with single-family home sales falling a little over 12% year-over-year.
So falling by 12.3%, based on my analysis, that's one of the worst Septembers we've had in quite some time. And also, this chart only goes back to 2018, but I'm going to share how the trends we're seeing today, or at least for this September, how it compares to years past, going back to January of 2016. Anyways, let's listen in.
And over in the townhouse and condo market, we saw the same pattern, with year-over-year sales declining 20.5% in June, and slightly more, by a couple tenths of a percentage point, in September.
So a bigger decrease of condo home sales compared to single family. By the way, today's video is only looking at single family houses. And if you guys want, I can make another video regarding condo sales and other metrics as well. So just let me know.
It is tempting to put some of the blame for this on the arrival of Hurricane Helene during the last full week of September. If you look at the calendar and take into account weekends, as well as the Labor Day holiday, there were only 20 business days during the month. Helene arrived late in the month, making landfall late on the night of the 26th as a powerful Category 4 storm that also happened to be a much wider storm than the typical hurricane. As a result, the right side of the storm, the side with onshore winds, brought about substantial storm surge well down the Gulf Coast of the peninsula. So despite the center of the storm making landfall in the Big Bend area, the most sparsely populated part of the state, there was still a significant impact all the way down through the Tampa Bay region, at least near the water. So definitely some disruptions during those last 3 business days of the month.
But wait for it though, because here in a little bit, he kind of retracts because he shares the decrease in sales across all the counties in Florida, not just looking at the counties that were impacted by this hurricane.
One thing people often fail to take into account when analyzing the impact of events like these is that hurricanes can be disruptive to business even before they arrive and make landfall.
True.
Models were already predicting the formation and Florida impact of Hurricane Helene well in advance of its arrival, and the first advisories and forecast cones were issued by the National Hurricane Center on the morning of Monday the 23rd. Looking back at our calendar, that's an additional 3 days of disruptions caused by canceled or delayed appointments as we prepared for the storm.
Makes sense.
So now we're down to just 14 business days that were unaffected by Helene during the month. That said, the National Hurricane Center was remarkably consistent in its forecasting of Helene, and the cone largely focused in on the Big Bend area the entire time, keeping the worst of Helene off the highly populated west coast of the peninsula.
So that area, by the way, has around 150,000 people that live there. So it's not like a hurricane hit a major metropolitan area such as Miami or Jacksonville, Florida, etc. It did have a widespread destruction, but it directly hit a more sparsely populated area,
keeping the worst of Helene off the highly populated west coast of the peninsula. That allowed the real estate market in much of the peninsula and the western panhandle to essentially operate in a close to normal fashion as the storm approached. And while the surge was significant in the Tampa Bay area and certainly caused damage near the coast, Helene's central hurricane force winds missed all of the state's major population centers, minimizing power outages and inland structural damage as well. Now, Hurricane Milton is a different story, of course.
So Hurricane Milton hit in early October, so that could really impact October stats once they announce that in about 3 weeks.
The heavily populated I-4 corridor and parts of southwest Florida were in its sights for several days, and it had a much bigger impact inland when it arrived. So we should expect its before and after effects to be more significant.
Yeah.
But we will tackle that next month when we run through the October statistics.
Okay, wait for it. Here we go.
Looking now at September's year-over-year changes in closed home sales by county, you can see that most counties in Florida saw similar declines, regardless of their location, including areas that were never under any threat from Helene.
See that? So the Big Bend area is right about there, but other parts of the Florida, especially the Panhandle, I mean, they had a huge decrease in sales, even though they were not impacted by the hurricane that hit in late August,
including areas that were never under any threat from Helene. That tells me that Helene did not have a very significant impact on closed sales in September.
There you go. So he starts the video talking about how the hurricane could impact the housing market, especially looking at September numbers, but he retracts because virtually every single county or virtually every single metro in Florida saw big decreases in closed home sales. So speaking of that, let's talk about that regarding sales for this state as a whole. And again, this video is only looking at single family houses in the state. Now, here's something else I want to touch on as well before we kind of begin today's video. Much of these metrics from the Florida Realtors Association are not seasonally adjusted. Therefore, they're not adjusted for seasonal trends in transactions. In other words, a decline in sales in the winter months and an increase in sales during the spring home buying season, right? So because of that, my analysis of their data is going to focus on year-over-year changes, how that compares to the same month looking at years past. So we're looking at September this year. How's it compare to September going back to September of 2017? It says here closed home sales and many other market metrics are affected by seasonal cycles, so actual trends are more accurately represented by year-over-year changes. In other words, comparing a month's sales to the amount of sales during the same month in the previous year, rather than changes from a month-to-month basis, which has some seasonal effects, right? So in any case, this September, there was 18,721 closed home sales. What the housing market was like approximately 1 or 2 months ago when the home buyer got their offer accepted. But at 18,721, that was the fewest number of closed home sales for the month of September since September of 2017. Additionally, sales decreased by 12.3% year over year. That was the biggest year-over-year decrease since April last year. And again, this is pretty eye-opening given the fact that inventory levels have been surging, but sales are decreasing. On top of that, mortgage rates also decreased in August. So despite all these improvements, sales still fell by more than double digits. Let's also talk about the percent of cash sales. That was at 26.5% this September, which means that approximately 1/4 of all closed home sales in September came from a cash buyer. That was down by 9.6% year over year. Even though it is down compared to last year, though, it is within a reasonable range, within around 3 percentage points, looking at pre-pandemic levels. So in other words, a share at around 26% is more normal looking at pre-COVID. All right, let's talk about home prices based on the median sale price. That's at $410,000 this September, a small gain up by 0.2%. That actually is an improvement from last month decrease. Last month, prices decreased by 0.8%. That was the first time in about 12 years that the median sale price in Florida decreased compared to the previous year. In addition, home prices are still elevated for a state as a whole at 410,000. This is about 20,000 less than the all-time record high that was set back in April this year at approximately $430,000. Let's also discuss the sale price to original list price received. I absolutely love how they share the original price, how it compares to the sales price, because often they only look at the final list price and compare that to the sale price, which kind of like discounts any price reductions. So I love how the Florida Realtors looked at the original list price. Anyways, that ratio is at 95.9%. This means out of all the houses that did sell this September, they sold for 1.4 percentage points less than the seller's original asking price on average. This is lower than last year. Last year at this time, we're at 97.4%, but also lower than this time in 2019. Back then, the ratio was at 96.7%. Let's also discuss how fast houses are selling. Let's talk about the median days on the market. That was at 86 days. This is the time frame when you list your home for sale until you close or the sale is finalized based on closed transactions for the month. That was at 86 days, a big increase up by 22.9% year over year, because last year this time, it took about 70 days to sell a house. Now it's at 86 days. That, by the way, is the highest amount for the month since September of 2016. In addition, the gain of 22.9% is the biggest year-over-year increase since July of 2023. Okay, now let's talk about new pending sales, a measure of contracts being signed or buyers getting their offers accepted. Then we'll talk about new listings and, of course, housing inventory. Some very big changes here. So new pending home sales actually increased by 1.9% year over year. There was around 20,000 new pending home sales for the month. That was the first year-over-year increase since April this year. This improvement is likely from a decrease in mortgage rates that we saw in July and August, which caused new pending home sales to increase in September. However, though, will that get reversed next month given the rapid rise in rates we haven't been seeing really ever since mid-September this year? However, around 20,000 new pending home sales is about 15% less than the same month in 2019. So big picture, even though it's up by about 2% from last year's time, it's still way behind looking at pre-pandemic levels, down by about 15% over the past 5 years. Now let's have a look at the supply side. New listings, a measure of people placing their properties for sale in the market. There was just under 27,000 new listings this September, which is more or less on par with looking at 2016 through 2019. But it did decrease down by 4.9%. So if you guys want to see home prices absolutely crater in Florida, maybe you're looking to buy a house, you want to see home prices going down, new listings basically moving in the opposite direction. If you want to see a housing market crash, home prices decrease greatly, you'd want to see inventory skyrocketing, and of course, new listings also skyrocketing as well. This decline of about 5% year over year really caught my attention because we haven't seen this in quite some time. In fact, I looked at the previous reports here. The last time it's been negative was way back in August last year. This is quite a difference compared to the mostly double-digit gains we saw to start the year. So for example, from October last year through really May this year, excluding March this year and December last year, new listings were rising by more than 10%. And now we're basically moving the opposite direction, down by about 5%. All right, let's now have a look at the total number of properties that are for sale this month. That 95,943, that was a big increase, up by about 39.6% year over year. Besides the previous month, when we had 96,187 houses for sale, besides the previous month, this is the highest amount of houses for sale in Florida for any month since early 2019. What's also wild about that figure is that, we're not at the peak regarding inventory levels. Inventory tends to peak in Florida around the winter months, around January and February, for example. So looking at pre-COVID, Inventory peaked in 2019 in January or February. In 2018, it was in November. 2017, it was January or February. 2016, it was around February. And here we are in September, and inventory basically at a multi-year high, excluding the previous month. So pretty crazy that we're in September, but we're still at very high levels of inventory. Now here's something that really caught my attention as well: the month supply. The month supply in Florida is at 4.6 months. This is the highest amount for any month since at least, keywords at least, January of 2016. In other words, nearly a 9-year high. January of 2016, as far back as their public data goes. So I'm not too sure how high this figure is, but at least we all can agree it's at least a 9-year high right now. Also, a big increase, up by 43.8% from last year as well. Also, for comparison's sake, the month supply was only 3.6 months back in September of 2019. In other words, a glut of supply in the state as a whole. Now, something that really caught my attention as well, looking at closed home sales, we're talking about every single price segment, right? But here's a really good snapshot looking at closed home sales by price range, how it compares to 12 months ago. And virtually all price tiers here decreased greatly. In other words, we're not just seeing one segment of the market that's going down. All markets or all price segments here are going down by at least 8% year over year. Of course, excluding the small amount of home sales for less than $50,000 though, of course. They also provided this as well: the number of properties that are active or for sale by the end of the month by price tier as well. And again, big increases, over 10% in the range of $50,000 to over $1 million. Now, here's what really caught my attention though. In the range of $200,000 to $300,000, it increased by more than 55%. In contrast, homes for sale for over $1 million only increased by 25%. So in my opinion, based on this data right here, if you're looking to buy a house, you probably have more opportunity to buy a house and have a lot more options to choose from if your price range is in the range of $200,000 to $300,000. Okay, let's change gears again and talk about distressed home sales, which are defined by a foreclosure or a short sale. And less than 1% of all closed home transactions this month came from a distressed home sale. So the vast majority, around 99% of all home sales, were a regular traditional home sale. That was 18,554 compared to only 125 foreclosures and only 42 short sales that closed for the month. Therefore, less than 1% of all home sales this month were from a distressed home sale. And lastly, let's have a look at how each of the metros fare, because there's some very big differences, but overall sales decreased in every single one of the major metros in Florida. So again, overall for the state, closed home sales decreased by 12.3%, but sales decreased for all these metros, down greatly in Hermosa Springs, down by 30.5%. Jacksonville, Florida is down by 4.6%. I'm just going to talk about the more major metros. Miami, Florida is down by 12.5%, in line with the statewide average. Naples, Florida is down by 11.5%. Northport, Sarasota, Florida, down a whopping 17%. Then we have Orlando down by 3.5%. And lastly, the Tampa Bay area down a whopping 17.5%. And prices there decreased by 1.4%. In fact, there's actually a lot of metros that are down regarding their median sale price. Again, for the state as a whole, we're up by 0.2%. But in Cape Coral, Florida, down 4.3%. Crestview, Fort Walton Beach, Florida, down by 2.6%. Gainesville metro area down by 6.3%. Let's look at the bigger metros there. Jacksonville, Florida, up by 6.2%. Pretty crazy. Miami is up by 5%. In contrast, Naples, Florida is down by 4.9%. Northport, Sarasota, down by 3.9%. And also we have Orlando is flat year over year. And also rounding out here, again, Tampa, Florida is down by 1.4% year over year. With that said, if you guys got any value out of today's video, then please hit the like button. Also, please consider subscribing as well. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.